Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to this Friday Bhagavad Gita class organized by Stowell Krishna community. Today is Friday, July 2nd, 2021. Today's class will be on Bhagavad Gita 4.14, that is chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita, verse number 14, 1-4, and will be given by His Grace Raseswara Madhavadas Prabhuji. Before we hand over to Prabhuji, I would like to say a few introductory words about him. His Grace Raseswara Madhavadas, or Dr. Rikin Patel, is a pediatrician living in Scarborough and an assistant professor in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Toronto. He has been a disciple of His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj since the year 2015. Introduced to the practice of Bhakti Yoga as a child by his mom, he started practicing more seriously after being inspired by devotees while doing his master's in health policy and finance at the London of Economics in 2005. His 14 good years of school and residency have allowed him time to experiment, integrate, and practically apply the principles of Bhakti Yoga to his life while being immersed in a busy lifestyle. He has lived in brahmachari ashrams while in medical school in New York and then in the Chowpatty Brahmachari Ashram in Mumbai, India in the year 2015. He is a certified yoga teacher, having completed his training in India in 2019 at the Govardhan Eco Village. He has a particular interest in empowering young motivated leaders through character development based on the ancient wisdom texts of yoga and the Vedas, such as the Bhagavad Gita. He's always wanting to learn more about how these ancient wisdom texts can be applied to improve our collective wellness and resilience. Prabhu is on his duty as a doctor on call this evening at a hospital. However, he has managed to allocate his next 1 hour to the congregational members of Stowell Krishna community. Without further ado, let us all welcome His Grace Raseswar Madhavadas Prabhuji. Over to you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and Pitambar Prabhu, thank you for that very kind introduction. And it's very nice to be here with all of you. It's been a couple of months since we had last had the opportunity to be with you, and we're hoping to share something that can always be beneficial for everyone and can please our acharya and teachers. So I don't have kartals with me, but if someone wants to sing kartal, play kartals, I'll just sing quick Jai Radha Madhava and then we'll start. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopichana Vallabha Girivarata Hari Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada ki Jai. So, so again, as Pitam Prabhu mentioned, I little bit timed my schedule a little bit where I asked for the daytime off today, but then I realized that they just happened to put me on call in the evening, so I'm here in the hospital, just in my call room, but we're still able to make time for this class, and I really would not want to give it up because there's so much that I benefit from just being able to read and hopefully try to share something. So today we're going to be reading from Bhagavad Gita 4:14. So just after me, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So as mentioned, 4:14. So I'll just go ahead and for those of you that don't have the verse, maybe you can just pull it up on your computer. So I'll go ahead and speak the verse. Namam karmani limpati, name karme phale spriha, iti mam yo abhijananti, karma birna sa badhyate. So the translation is, there's no work that affects me, nor do I desire the fruits of action. One who understands this truth about me also does not become entangled in the fruitive reactions of work. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. One second. So the translation, as there are constitutional laws in the material world, starting that the king can do no wrong, or that the king is not subject to the state laws. Similarly, the Lord, although he is the creator of this material world, is not affected by the activities of the material world. He creates and remains aloof from the creation, whereas the living entities are entangled in the fruitive results of material activities because of their propensity for lording it over material resources. The proprietor of an establishment is not responsible for the right and wrong activities of the workers, but the workers are themselves responsible. The living entities are engaged in their respective activities of sense gratification, and these activities are not ordained by the Lord. For advancement of sense gratification, the living entities are engaged in the work of this world, and they aspire to heavenly happiness after death. The Lord, being full in himself, has no attraction for the so-called heavenly happiness. The heavenly demigods are only his engaged servants. The proprietor never desires the low-grade happiness, such as the workers may desire. He is aloof from the material actions and reactions. For example, the rains are not responsible for different types of vegetation that appear on Earth, although without such rains, there is no possibility of vegetative growth. Vedic Smriti confirms this fact as follows. Nimitta matram eva sho Shri Jinam Sarga Karmani Pradhan Karani Bhuta Yato Vai Shri Chicha Shaktaya. In the material creations, the Lord is the only supreme cause. The immediate cause is material nature, by which cosmic manifestation is made visible. The created beings are of many varieties, such as demigods, human beings, and lower animals, and all of them are subject to the reactions of their past good or bad activities. The Lord only gives them proper facilities for such activities and the regulations of the modes of nature, but he is never responsible for their past and present activities. In the Vedanta Sutra 2.134, it is converse, Vasayamsa nagrine na sapek atvat. The Lord is never partial to any living entity. The living entity is responsible for his own acts. The Lord only gives him facilities through the agency of material nature, the external energy. Anyone who is fully conversant with all the intricacies of this law of karma or fruitive activities does not become affected by the results of his activities. In other words, the person who understands this transcendental nature of the Lord is an experienced man in Krishna consciousness, and thus he is never subjected to the laws of karma. One who does not know the transcendental nature of the Lord, and who thinks that the activities of the Lord are aimed at fruitive results, as are the activities of the ordinary living entities, certainly become entangled himself in fruitive reactions. But one who knows the supreme truth is liberated soul fixed in Krishna consciousness. So please, with me, Om Gyan Timirandasya Gyananjana Shlakaya Chaksur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakaramayam Dadanti Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuda Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sragajatam Sahagana Rugana Anvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishak Anvitam Sha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindha Dino Bando Jagapate Kopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanshna Gaurangi Radhe Vrindaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpadrubhyascha Kripasunda Evacha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So again, thank you so much for joining us today and just seeking blessings and prayers from all the Vaishnavas and devotees that are on this call. Again, that we can speak something that is pleasing to all of our gurus and that is beneficial for everybody that has joined. So thank you for joining. So this is a really wonderful verse. Actually, 4th chapter is a great chapter because we're really in this chapter really understanding what is transcendental knowledge, and if we use this transcendental knowledge, how we can achieve the goal of life, right? And so I'm going to just start off with some basic concepts that we can understand, just some basic principles to understand. But that, first of all, in this chapter of 4:14, it's speaking of us as conditioned souls and Krishna and how we are different. So we should remember and understand that as conditioned souls, we are independent and we have desires for pleasure. And when we act on those, because we are acting on those desires for pleasure, this is in fact what binds us to this material nature. And therefore, so many of our actions are influenced by the modes of material nature, right? And so therefore we have actions and we get reactions. Krishna is different on the other hand. His own actions are different. He engages in many different activities, but he is basically completely distant and in one sense, detached from all of the activities and results because he's desireless. His activities are, when he performs activities, we are subjected to Mahamaya, which is the external energy of the Lord, but all of his activities are occurring within Yogamaya, which is the internal Shakti of the Lord. And because he's acting from that internal Shakti, he's not bound by the modes of material nature, right? As we are. And so because he's materially desireless, right? That there's no reactions that come from any of the actions or work that he performs, right? And so as we remember from the last verse was really talking about the Varna Ashram system, right? And so the Varna Ashram system is that he's designed this, right, for us, but he's not bound or he's not subjected to the same laws and regulations of this, right? And so the way I like to think of, the way you can think of Krishna is the same as the lotus flower, right? It might be in a very muddy water, but the lotus flower, nothing can actually taint or stain the lotus flower because everything will just fall right off. It can stay pure even in the most contaminated environment. And Krishna is the same way, right? So one of the themes that comes up in this verse is that Krishna is free from all fruitive attachments, right? He has, from the previous verse, we know that the Varna Ashram system. So we have Varna and Ashram, right? And so we have the four, institutions of life by which we progress. And then we also have 4 spiritual institutions by we also progress. So that's Varna and then Ashram, right? And so I guess one may say because Krishna's completely detached and he doesn't have any, he doesn't have any control about what happens in the system created, why would we follow the Varna ashram system, right? So we may ask ourselves that question. And the reason why we follow a Varna ashram system is because he basically, I mean, two really big reasons. One is that the Varna ashram system is created by him, and when Krishna creates something for the living entity, it's purely for our benefit, right? So not only does the Varna ashram system allow us to fulfill our desires that we have, but it's also an opportunity to get purified, right? So that is really one of the main reasons why we should try to follow this system, is because we are following Krishna's system, and as you can imagine, anything that Krishna creates or establishes, if we follow that, that pleases Krishna. And ultimately that's our goal, is to please Krishna, because from his happiness, our happiness comes. And even though for many of us, that might seem like something that's not something we can comprehend so easily, but as we progress and as we continue to practice, we will see that if we take ourselves out of the center and put Krishna in the center, our happiness in fact increases, right? And so this, the application of this point here, this theme that Krishna is free from all attachments, or the one question we may ask ourselves is, why is Krishna not responsible for our right and wrong activities, right? One may say, well, Krishna, maybe this is what Krishna wanted. This is why I'm doing this, whether it be, right or wrong. But the reason why Krishna is not responsible for our activities is because the only thing that Krishna basically keeps in our control is our free will to choose, right? There's no force at all from Krishna. And we know that from, if we look back at, but the concern arises when we use our free will for ourselves and material enjoyment, right? And that's where, if we remember Bhagavad Gita 3:27, kartatam iti manyate, I am the doer of my activities, right? And we do this, we think like this because we are being driven and governed by the ego. And then the second reason why Krishna is not responsible is because we have our choice, but then we also have material nature, the three modes. And in 3:27, Krishna also says, prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasa. So this means that what people may think is they're the doer. In fact, it's all influenced by the modes of material nature that push us in these directions, right? And so we see now in this chapter, one of the kind of main points to take out of this verse is that, as we mentioned, Krishna creates, but he's unaffected by the activities of this world. And that as living entities, we are entangled. And why are we entangled? It's very important to understand why we as living entities are entangled, right? It's because we still have this desire for control, right? And in the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada, he always uses this term over again, lording it over material nature, lording it over, right? The living entity wants to lord it over. Lording it over basically means we want to control situations, we want to control people, and this is because we have expectations, right? So this is why this propensity to lord over is this Ishwara Bhav that's so strong within the living entity to control, right? And we see, in this chapter, there's a couple of analogies that are given that the king, he's not subject to state laws, although he creates the laws, right? And I was trying to think of an example that kind of, resembles the same thing. But maybe people have heard about this term called diplomatic immunity, right? So for diplomats of the government in Canada, for example, I mean, I'll just use Canada as the example. But when you are a diplomat, you have diplomatic immunity, right? And that means that if you are in another country, so for example, ambassadors are diplomats, and when they are, let's say we have a diplomat to in Canada, who's a diplomat in India. So he represents Canada within India. He is not actually subject to the laws of the country of India while he's living there, right? And so he, again, this is not supposed to be taken advantage of, but again, it's an example in our day-to-day life of, let's say the government creates a law, right? But these representatives are not subject to the laws as everyone else is, right? And I was just trying to think of a practical example. And I was just reading a little bit more about this diplomatic immunity, which I thought was very fascinating. But when you read about diplomatic immunity specifically on Wikipedia, it says that the ancient and the origins of this diplomatic immunity, they actually reference the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, which I thought was very interesting, because we have this example that happens in the Vedic tradition of when in the time of the kings. One specific one is where where Ravana, he ordered the killing of Hanuman, right? But because Hanuman came as a messenger to Lanka, right? And obviously Ravana didn't like the information he was bringing forward. So he said, we must kill him, right? And Ravana's younger brother Vibhishan specifically pointed out that messengers or diplomats should not be killed as per the law and the ancient practice. So again, this is just a small little example of how an example of where this concept of diplomatic immunity comes from. It actually comes from, we can see it in our shastras and in our texts, which I thought was very interesting. But again, Krishna is of this nature where he creates, but he's not impacted by what he creates. And then the second analogy that's also used in this verse, if we see proprietor who's not responsible for the activities of the worker, right? And so if we remember, I mean, one of the practical things I was thinking about this is you have, for example, owners of companies, CEO of companies, anyone who is responsible at the top, right? They create, right now in the working world, very much it's looked at what is the quality of life and health of the employees. So at these big companies, Google and all these things, they're creating specific spaces, spaces where employees can go, they can relax, they can do certain activities that are not related to work. They create all these facilities for people, to improve their health, their work-life balance. And again, this could be, this is an example of the CEO. He may create all of this, but he's not going down there and participating, or he may not be, he doesn't know about all the activities that happen within these spaces that that has been created by him. And similarly, the Lord is not, it says here that the Lord is not interested in any kind of material happiness, even heavenly planets, right? So we see that here, and we can see this amongst different, even devotees, non-devotees, but that everyone's experiencing life at a based on different taste, right? Everyone's experiencing life. And so, and this goes back to from a few weeks ago, from 4:11, right? That Krishna is rewarding everyone according to their level of endeavor, right? It's not that the person who is, putting in no effort into their spiritual endeavor is getting less than the person who's putting less is getting more than the other person who's making the effort, right? And so again, it's just the very much the theme of this, not only this verse, but also the whole Bhagavad Gita is the one of responsibility on us to be able to reflect on what our behavior is and try to improve and change, right? Any thoughts or questions or comments that's come up so far? Just wanted to see if there was anything that has come up on anything that's been said. No? Okay, so we'll keep going. Then the other point that we wanted to, other kind of like main point that came out of this is that Krishna is the Lord and he's aloof from material actions and reactions, right? And so we can learn so much about spiritual life by looking at nature, right? It says, it gave the example of rains being responsible for different types of vegetation. And although without rains, there's no possibility of vegetative growth, right? And similarly, the rain and the sun are similar in the sense that they give, the sun gives all its sunshine to everyone equally. The rain, distributes rain equally, right? And all this is equal distribution, right? That happens there. Just so that everything is being distributed equally, right? And this is all facilitated by the Lord. But as it says in the two verses that were quoted in Vedic Smriti, it says that the supreme Lord, he's the supreme cause, but the immediate cause is material nature. So the material nature, remember, is acting on the will of the Lord. And then it says that, the second verse that it also is quoting from the Vedanta Sutra is that the Lord is never impartial, right? But the living entity is responsible. So the nice thing about this line is that we all have equal opportunity, right? The Lord doesn't discriminate against anyone. However, it's our responsibility. Like, our effort is our responsibility. Looks like we have a comment. Oh, he's just requesting for questions, no problem. So that was the second point that we wanted to make. Again, just reiterating this point of having our choice, and this free will is very important. And that the Lord remains detached, right, from everything that happens. And we gave that example of the company owner, the CEO, creating different things for everyone, but not necessarily being, there's no direct presence of this individual to the material, like the actions of what's happening in these spaces, right? And so then moving on to I would say the most really important part of this verse is the information of how we can, in the last part of this verse, it describes who is experienced in bhakti, in Krishna consciousness, and who becomes entangled by misunderstanding of the Lord, right? And so it specifically says there, right, that one who understands the transcendental nature of the Lord is an experienced individual. And that person, when they become fully conversant in the intricacies of karma, does not become affected by the results. So this is really, really important, because we know that, from 4.9, as we mentioned, from Bhagavad Gita 4.9, then really one who knows the transcendental nature, this is mentioned in 4.9, right? Janma karma chame divyam, right? Those who, Krishna says that who knows my appearance and my activities, these two things, appearance and activities, they actually come back to my abode. So this is then basically our clue for where we need to start, right? And so then, just very practical ways, the process of surrender is very long, but one of the very practical ways that I always look at of how to learn about Krishna's activities and his appearance, if we just take Krishna book is such a, in one sense, it's such a book that's so practical, because we're getting purified, we're learning about Krishna's activities, we're learning about his appearance, and so many things. Again, it, like, reading Krishna book basically fulfills 4.9 and how we can do this on a practical day-to-day basis, right? And then the other very practical application of, kind of being aware of this transcendental nature is Shravanam, right? Is Shravanam from devotees, senior devotees, and those that have been practicing and have deep realization from their practice. But not only just hearing, right? We always talk about in this practice of bhakti that hearing is just one part, but there has to be manana, which means we have to meditate on the information, and nididhyasana, which means trying to apply the information in our life, right? And we can always, all three things, shravanam, mananam, nididhyasana, it doesn't mean that we can't share this with others. It's always important. I feel that the best way to do some manana and nididhyasana is just start talking about this philosophy to somebody else, even if it's just a family member. But even in that in that sharing of, if see simply even with family members, we get some opportunity to reflect and hopefully some opportunity to apply. Because usually whenever we share, some question is going to come, some challenge is going to come, some doubt is going to come. But this is a really, really important way to help integrate the information, and it makes it better. It makes it much easier for us to apply the information in our life, right? Because immediately, I mean, one of the reasons that I choose always to share information is that it always it keeps the oven hot for us to be always meditating and applying the information. Because what good is it if we speak something, but we're not trying to imbibe it and apply it ourselves, right? But if we speak something, we're given that, encouragement, that push to also apply it as well, right? And so we know that the path of surrender is very is very long, but we should also know what is surrender. What is this Bhagavad Gita is always talking about surrender so often, but what does that surrender look like? And surrender in our Bhakti Shastra is described in two places. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes it specifically in CC, right? He specifically describes this in CC, but then it's also mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion. But I'm going to talk about just briefly the 6 qualities that describe the divisions of surrender, right? And these are really important to consider. But the first quality of surrender is that one accepts everything that is favorable for rendering service to the Lord. And then the second one is immediately that anything that is unfavorable, we basically put aside, right? And that we're always mindful of what is unfavorable, right? This is how Prabhupada describes renunciation. Everything is in reference to service of the Lord, which means that even if something may be material, if we can use it to serve Krishna, that's still something we should, seek out, right? But if it cannot be used in service of the Lord, then that's something that we have to let go of and do without, right? The third symptom of surrender that is in Madhya Lila. And again, for those that are looking at the specific reference, I'll put it in the box. It's CC Madhya Lila, specifically 22-100. I'll just put it in the box right now. But this is where the reference is. And even more, like another place where this is spoken about, Jiva Goswami talks about it in I'm just trying to think, one of the Sandarbhas. He also lists these 6 symptoms or aspects of surrender. So people can go and look at it. Now, the third element of surrender is that a devotee is firmly convinced that Krishna will give him protection in all situations, right? And this kind of firm conviction that Krishna will always give him protection, this is the faith that we are really looking for, right? In life, is this firm faith that Krishna is going to give us protection in all situations. And so the fourth element is that the devotee understands that Krishna accepts Krishna as a supreme maintainer and master, right? And so the reason why the focus is on Krishna is that many times we go to devatas, to demigods to fulfill some desires. But we see that if we're really, really trying to rely on Krishna, that we go to everything, everything we made, even if it's a material desire, still, we go to Krishna, right? And we can see the one example I always put to, because sometimes devotees, they feel bad, they're going to Krishna, they may be asking for something material, whether it be, job, spouse, something, some material achievement, certain grades. They may go to Krishna, but still go, because even if we look at in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's just filled with stories of devotees, Mahajans, that had maybe some material desires, but they went to Krishna for it. And the example I always like to reference is Kardama Muni. Kardama Muni, he was basically a Nashtik brahmachari, but when he had this desire to have a wife, he basically said, Krishna, he said, please just bless me with this desire that I have so it can be used in your service. So he knew that this desire, it just doesn't go away, but he went to Krishna, right? For when he wanted that, to fulfill that desire, and Krishna arranged everything for him. So again, this supreme maintainer and master that we try to, if anything we may need, we go to Krishna for it exclusively, right? All the demigods, anyways, when you go to them, they have to knock on Krishna's door and saying, hey, this bhakta is asking me for this. And although they've been empowered, right? Saraswati's giving knowledge, and Ganesh, he's removing obstacles, and anything we may, desire from a material benediction point of view. Ultimately, the devata, even if we're asking them, they're ultimately going to Krishna. So we might as well just go to the root of the tree rather than the branches and the leaves. And then, the fifth and sixth aspect is self-surrender, means that we're remembering that one's activities and desires are not dependent, right? That basically Krishna's desires become our desires. And this is someone who's completely then sees that their life and their agenda is completely what Krishna's life and agenda is, becomes their own desires. And then the sixth symptom of surrender is someone who is meek and humble, right? So that's why this quality of humility is so important, and Mahaprabhu talks about it at length, but specifically in the Shikshashtakam prayers, right? Tolerant as a tree, we should be more humble than a blade of grass, not expecting recognition and praise from others, but willing to give it to others. Really, these qualities all exemplify humility. And so these are, again, I just wanted to review these qualities of surrender, because sometimes we talk about these qualities, or this term surrender. It's spoken so much, but what does it mean, right? And it's very distinctly described in very six definite ways that which we can see surrender in others, but we can also use it as a measure for ourselves as well, right? And so as we know that this surrender is such a lofty goal, so we have to start and take our baby steps as practitioners on a day-to-day basis. And so I thought about this, where do we start first? And the first place to start is just being honest with where we're at. But if we want to really try to make practical steps towards this process of surrender, then we have to at first really just try to situate ourselves and be around other people that are on this path. So association and who our company is very important in this regard, as a very initial first step, right? And so all of you that have come here, really this is that that initial first step. And then maybe after we get some inspiration, we have a mentor, and then that we get inspiration from that mentor, and having that mentorship is very important on that guidance. I was just talking to someone earlier today, and that mentorship really is important, because it basically prepares ourselves to surrender to a guru, right? Because until, like, your mentor, you may choose not to listen to, but really that the mentorship is there for that accountability, right? I was just saying that accountability is, the mind and the ego do not like accountability. They just don't, right? I mean, we can all attest to that. But this is why the mentor is there, to provide that space for accountability and mentorship. And then finally, we if we one day take initiation from a guru, then at that point, we're committed, which means we made vows, and accountability is not a choice. It's something that you've chosen. But again, I'm just sharing this in a kind of a progressive way for us to be able to practically take wherever we're at and then apply it, right, to our own life. And that's why, when we talk about these different steps in our bhakti, ado shata tato sadhu sangha. So there's first some shraddha, faith, then there's sadhu sangha, we get the association, and then there's bhajana kriya. So in bhajana kriya is with a path where we start to sincerely practice and we take initiation. And it's only after that initiation process, syat anartha nivritti. So then the anarthas start to get uprooted. Is after this process of initiation that we've firmly trying to commit, and we're asking we know we admit to ourselves that we cannot do this on our own. We need a spiritual guide, a mentor, a teacher to help us then uncover and pull to root out all the anarthas. And this process is anartha nivriti. And so then, then there the progressions after anartha nivriti, then we have nishtha, firm faith. And then from there, we have ashakti, ruchi, bhava, and prema, right? So these 9 processes kind of give us the whole journey of our bhakti practice. But really, for most of us, we're mostly, most of us are probably in the phase of sadhu sangha. We're getting some association. We're starting to practice some bhajana kriya. And then, anartha nivriti sometimes can be quite long because there's much there to uproot. But again, please just see this as like a step-by-step process that, we've come together. And even just by coming here together today, we're taking that next step. Because again, the goal is quite high and the goal is quite lofty, but we ourselves, if we're willing to do a little bit of just reflection, we can easily see there's so many guideposts that are placed in our bhakti text for where we are, and then what hopefully the next step is. So these are just some points that I wanted to share from today's verse. And I see just right now, I'll just go ahead and take the first question. So Ashwani, thank you for this question. So what are some of the best ways, practices to keep faith, especially during tough times? So this is a very, very good question. Thank you so much for asking this question. I think, there's 2 parts about faith, is that one, we have to make our effort, right? So trying to follow the process, whether it be associating, chanting, reading, engaging, doing some offering, taking some prasad, these, practical aspects should be there, because that is our own kind of nourishment that we're trying to uplift ourselves. But then really, I mean, to me, the point that we should always be trying to surround ourselves with people who have more faith than us, right? Difficult times are going to come, and we see that those that have practiced for a long time, that have gone through ups and downs, but they're still steady, they've gone through many different experiences, but because the practice is strong, we're able to go through the highs and the lows. So if we don't have that, that's okay. Many of us may not have kind of what it takes to go through certain difficult times. So therefore, then it's really important to seek the company of those, friendship, mentorship, guidance, of those that have that stronger faith, right? I always say that if we don't have a desire in anything in life, that we have to spend time with the people that have that desire. It just does not come on its own, right? We have to spend time with people that have that earnest and sincere desire. And then that, again, this is why company is so important, because then it finally, hopefully one day will rub off on us. And so again, if having stronger faith is our desire, we have to look to those group of people that have that desire. And to this point, the Bhagavatam, it talks about very distinctly in that first canto that there's 2 Bhagavats. There's the book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat, right? There's the book Bhagavat, means the text, the words of Krishna that Vyasadeva has written down, the words of the Shastra. And then there's the person Bhagavat, right? And then of the 2 Bhagavats, the one who is the most important Bhagavat is the person Bhagavat, right? Because the person Bhagavat exemplifies the qualities that the book Bhagavat speaks of, right? So basically in the person Bhagavat, ideally, we're getting both in one spot, right? Because they have the realization and the application of what's in the books. And so the person Bhagavat is always someone we should be seeking company of, association with, because they've applied and they've manifested the knowledge in their life. So again, just speaking, I'm only mentioning this because again, it's speaking to the point of finding the right company, having the right type of association for us to be able to develop sometimes what we don't have. And it's okay that we don't have it, but definitely there will be someone who may, that we should just seek out their, their company. So that's just a little bit of just some practical thoughts on this idea of developing faith during tough times. Anybody else have any questions, or maybe if people wanted to just share their any reflections or thoughts, anything that maybe stood out to them, we really appreciate hearing anything like that. Also, please.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Assessor Prabhu. Thank you so much for the wonderful 4.14 explanation, Prabhu. Wonderful. There is, before we open the forum for the questions for them to unmute, I had one question, Prabhu, which I would like to ask for me as well as on behalf of everyone, for the benefit of everyone.
Please.
So I have put up that question in the chat box. The question is, Prabhu, that despite we knowing that we are not the proprietor or controller of anything and everything around us, why do we still think most of the time, Prabhu, that we are the doers?
We know that the material energy is very strong, and the reason why and it is strong because in fact it is, even Mahamaya, this material energy, is Krishna's energy, right? And that is, that is there for a few reasons, but really the primary reason is it covers us if we're not looking for Krishna. But if we are looking for Krishna, it's still there to test our real determination, our sincerity, our patience to be able to go the distance. Because when we go back to, the spiritual world, everyone there has crossed the journey and they passed the test. So everyone there, they're bona fide, and they've come in with the mood of keeping Krishna in the center. So one of the reasons sometimes why I feel, and this is going to sound really difficult, but sometimes we just have and it goes to this verse, this 529, Bhoktiaram Yagatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, right? So that if we just understand these three things, these 3 points on the peace formula, right? That Krishna is the proprietor of everything. He enjoys all the results of our hard work, and that he's everyone's best friend. If we can just remember these 3 points, we have a chance of being able to peel away from that identity of that ahankar that's so strong, right? And it literally requires like a daily recitation of these 3, points, right? That we're not the ones that are in control. But sometimes I feel that, it's so hard, and it may seem difficult. I mean, the material energy is really difficult, and that's why Krishna says, Duratyaya, it's difficult to overcome. Only one that's, surrender that can come. But I just feel like, in my own practical experience, sometimes we're attached because we still haven't been burnt enough yet by the material energy, right? We go through a hard time, and then, again, unfortunately, sometimes we forget about those hard times, right? We forget even, Prabhu, you're such an example because you have gone, especially with your own health, you've just been through so much. And, our prayer genuinely should be is that we don't forget about those hard times, because that really, tries, at best, it can really try to, keep us grounded and always cognizant that at any moment things can change for us. And so best to just try to be humble and not attached of being in control. So those are just some thoughts on your question.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you so much for enlightening. That is wonderful. I was also remembering on that when you were speaking, Prakrute Priyamanani Gune Karmani Sarvasa Ahankara Vimudhatma Karta Hamiti Manyata Ahankara. So Vimudhatma, we are all Vimudas, Prabhu, and Prabhupada says. And Ahankara is the one which is leading for us to believe Karta Hamiti Manyate. So Prabhu, thank you so much for the wonderful.
And just, something that's coming to me right now is that really the best chance we have, again, of situating ourselves in a place where we're not in always this space of I'm the doer, is trying to, as best as possible, to be in, in the mode of goodness, in sattva or shuddha sattva, which is direct practice of bhakti, right? That is, the more time we can spend in these modes, the better the chance we have, because again, rajas and tamas, they really, really don't allow us to break away from this mindset.
Thank you, Prabhu. So from what you said, Prabhu, I really picked up the 6 limbs of surrender as you said in the giving reference of Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila. So the first one is accept what is favorable. Second one is reject outright what is unfavorable to Krishna consciousness. Third one is a devotee is firmly convinced that Krishna will always give protection, a firm faith in Krishna. The fourth one is that Krishna is accepted by the devotees as a supreme master and controller all the time. The fifth one is self-surrender in the sense that Krishna's desire is our desires. We don't have any desires independent of serving Krishna. And the sixth and the last one you said is there has to be attitude of meek and humble. We should have that humility within us. So very nice, Prabhu.
Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you, sir.
And in this point, sometimes we may say, okay, well, I don't know what, this fifth point specifically of not maybe knowing what Krishna's desire is, that because the guru comes as a representative, as best possible, we try to align ourselves with whatever the guru's desire is, then also becomes our desire. That's really our connection, of knowing what Krishna's desire is.
So in other words, we should always be serving in the mood of Guru Maharaj. We should be always imbibing the mood of our Guru Maharaj.
Yeah, and again, if we're not initiated, no problem, but at least having some sort of guidance of having some mentorship or guidance for people that have progressed a little bit further, because they can give us that vision of what the practical next step is in our life.
For sure, Prabhu. We cannot overemphasize the importance of what you said, that we should always be humble and we should always be in the association of devotees who can guide us every step of our life. Because Prabhu, ups and downs, everybody's life is subjected to, and we need to have that equipoise status provided we are in the association of devotees. So very nice, Prabhu. So with that, I would open the forum for questions again. If any of the devotees have got any questions, either on 4.14 or any spiritual question, Prabhu will be more than happy to answer. Please unmute and ask and take the most out of this golden opportunity. Devotees, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. How are you?
Good, Prabhuji. Thank you for coming for our Stouffville community and giving us the teaching. I have one question regarding 4.14, Prabhuji.
Please.
We know that the Supreme God is not affected by the laws of karma and everything, but why is he showing us that he is actually been affected in a way that because of the curse of Gandhari, Krishna got killed, right?
Oh, so right. You're referring to that because the 100 sons had passed away. Gandhari blamed Krishna, right?
Yeah. But why Krishna had to show us that is actually getting affected by the laws of karma?
Yeah, so that's a very good point. And we'll see, and that won't be the only situation, but we'll definitely see. I think there's a lot of times when we see a lot of stories and situations, Krishna Leela, like especially the Leelas, they don't always kind of equate or maybe logically make sense, right? And so it's also Krishna's prerogative to, because in fact, also we probably have to remember here that Gandhari is also a great devotee as well, right?
Yes,
and so Krishna also has a prerogative too of falling in one sense under kind of the material purviews if he chooses to kind of fulfill the desire of the devotee as well. And so in that specific situation, I would say that Krishna, the Leela, there's certain Leelas. And again, whenever usually something manifests that has been, it usually manifests from someone like a devotee who has either made a claim, made a promise that Krishna, then, looks to uphold, right? And so, yes, in this situation, we can definitely say, okay, Krishna, there's material, but usually in these situations, we have to step back and see what the context is. And a lot of the times what we don't understand in a lot of Leelas is what was the backstory. And what I mean by the backstory is that the previous lives of the personalities that are involved in certain Leelas, that apparently then when we look at the present situation, we'll think that it's something material. But again, there's always divine arrangement in every situation. But it's a really good question. I would definitely say that it's quite it's an advanced topic to analyze because there's so many varying situations. But this is just some initial thoughts on your question.
Yeah, that's probably that is correct, but I understand. But we are reading about Krishna, we are in Krishna consciousness, so we can understand the Leelas of Krishna. But the people who are not into Krishna consciousness are not knowing about Krishna. If they are there, then they won't think that Krishna is a god, right? They would always think that he is acted by the laws of karma, right? And why Krishna had to show them that he's not a supreme god. That's what I'm trying to understand.
No, and this point comes up very much with devotees, but then it's still also and see, Krishna doesn't act to fulfill, to fulfill our conception of right and wrong, right? So this is a really important thing to remember, is that he acts independent. We may see all these different leelas and stories, and they're there, but they're not to basically fit our kind of narrow purview of what is right and wrong. And so if someone chooses to say, well, this is just all material, and I can't really believe that Krishna is God based on this situation, then again, it's a situation where Krishna covers them in that specific instance. But the main thing we have to remember is that Krishna still has the choice and prerogative to be able to act as he wishes, independent of what other people are going to think. But, I mean, in our example, because we are conditioned, we should always try to be the best representative, right? Because, and you're very correct to think that people will misinterpret and misunderstand. That has always been there, and it'll continue to be there. But so I know it may not. Sorry, go ahead, please.
If more people thinks about Krishna like that, then there won't be more believer, right? That's what I feel.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely that's the case. But again, everybody has their own, everyone has their own journey, and everyone has kind of their own time and place, right? And perhaps, again, like Krishna gives us all equal opportunity, right? But the material energy is acting. And so it still puts the responsibility on us. I mean, definitely we all are, practicing bhakti by some amount of mercy, but the mercy has come as a result of our previous actions, right? That we've done either in this life or a previous life. And so all we can do for those people in that situation is find some way to connect them to bhakti in a way that speaks to them or is relevant to them in that situation. Because Krishna Leela, I will tell you, it's a very advanced, it's for a very high level practitioner. I mean, even for myself, I don't understand all the intricacies and details of all the Leelas. And that's not something that I'm always, worried about or stressed out about, because I know where I am, and I'm just, for now, this is where I am. When I'm learning as much as I can. When it comes up, yes, everyone's faith needs to be challenged in the process, right? For us to continue to keep going. But I've also come to, we also come to the realization that Krishna will act and make decisions that our material mind can't always reconcile.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you.
Hare Krishna, Raseshwar Prabhu. Can I add something to Swaminathan Prabhu's question, Prabhu?
Please, please.
I was just thinking when you were answering. So, Swaminathan Prabhu, the first thing is Krishna is a Janma, he is never born, or he is never killed, or he never dies. So that's the first thing we should understand. Second thing, what Raseshwar Prabhu said is that Krishna's Leelas or pastimes are inconceivable. What I mean by inconceivable is within our conditioned tiny material brain, we cannot understand or comprehend the true purpose and the true Leelas of Krishna. So that's the second thing I wanted to emphasize, add to what Raseshwar Prabhu said. And the third thing, Prabhu, is that Krishna always finds a reason to appear or disappear from the Leelas. I'm not using the word birth, born, or death, die. I'm using the word appear or disappear. Krishna always either appears or disappears. And then he finds some of the reasons for either appearing or disappearing from this Leela of his macro plan, So he would make sure that either there is a benediction, which is boon, or a curse of someone by which the things happen. So, for example, when Krishna appears, the reason was the three avatars, the Sutapa and Vrishni and all those. So up to Vasudeva and Devaki. So there was a reason from the past of Krishna why he appeared. Basically, he is appearing for satisfaction of his devotees. And similarly, he will find a reason to disappear. And as Swaminathan Prabhu, you said rightly that Gandhari spoke something which he wanted to uphold, he wanted to make true, because Gandhari, being a devotee, although relative but utmost devotee of Krishna, Krishna would always want to satisfy the devotees' desires. So he found a reason, one more reason for his Leela to wind up, which is disappearing from the Leela. So Prabhu, that's all I wanted to add. Am I on the correct line of thinking, Raseshwar Prabhu, to Swaminathan Prabhu's question?
Yeah, Prabhu. I mean, everything, all the points you made were really good. And, Swaminathan Prabhu, I just wanted to say that this is a really good question. And it's important that for all of us to ask such a question in our journey, because if we, and I will also just speak kind of from my own experience, that we ask a question once in our spiritual life, we get some information, maybe not like full satisfaction, but as we go, I can assure you this, that the answers come with time. But we don't always get maybe the internal satisfaction of having the question fully answered at once. Sometimes we have the answer unfolds over time. So, but I still think that all of us should be asking that question. So I'm really happy though that you still asked it.
But I understood the answer, Prabhuji. Like you said, everybody's karma is acting on them. Only people with the less karma, due to the mercy of Krishna, and also due to, like you said, our previous birth karmas, we are able to understand Krishna. But the people who are not understanding, it's because of their past bad karmas, I think.
Yeah, and so really, if we have to go back to Krishna's desire, he wants everyone to come back. And as his servants, our responsibility is to try to, give out as much sukriti as we can so people can come to that, platform where they can understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Anybody else with any questions or any comments? Hopefully people aren't sleeping behind their screens. Can I get a thumbs up if people are still awake? You can use this emoji. We have this thumbs up. All right, I see some thumbs. Good. But maybe some people are sleeping. Anyways, thank you so much, everyone, for listening during this time. And we really appreciate everyone's attentiveness. And please, let us know how we can be of service in the future. And we look forward to hopefully joining in the future again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raseswar Prabhu, for your valuable time in association. I know, Prabhu, you were on duty, you were on call as a doctor at a hospital, and you made some alternative arrangement, at least to dedicate 1 hour to Stoville Krsna community, Prabhu. We are all grateful on behalf of the congregation of Stoville Krsna community. I would want to thank you wholeheartedly and hope to have your valuable association again in the future, Prabhu. So please enlighten us with your spiritual wisdom as and when possible within your very tight, busy schedule. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
No, I'm very thankful for the opportunity, Pitambar Prabhu, and I'll always, come and take the opportunity when I can.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you all devotees for attending as well. Thank you so much. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha कृपा सिंधुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भगवद गीता की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि
हरि बोल।
हरि बोल।
हरि बोल। Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everyone.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you.